Welcome to Grizzly Bear Blues Live. My name is Shawn Coleman. You can see me right here. It says Shawn Coleman. There we are. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, as always. And joining me is former GBB live host and co-host through this special summer session. Me and Parker are going to be doing a series of episodes, breaking down, some draft prospects. Haven't really gotten to the draft prospects, but we've gotten into, looking at some different philosophies, perspectives, approaches when it comes to the draft. And that's what we're going to do again tonight. But Parker, before we get into that, pleasure to talk with you again, as always. Hope you're having a good evening, sir.
Yeah, to you as well, Sean. It's been a blast talking about the NBA draft and Memphis Grizzlies offseason with you. I hope that this is, I think, third time's a charm when it comes to our technical difficulties. So
Yeah.
maybe I don't know what it is. Maybe the basketball gods don't want us talking about this at all. But Sean, it's great to be talking with you and glad we are. There's a lot to unpack and there's 3 weeks away from the draft. That's exciting, right?
Yeah, I think there's two factors that are going into the technical issues that are happening. I'm old and I'm a dumbass. So I think that I'm an old dumbass. So if you put those two together, I think that's the reason why. You don't have to agree or disagree. I'll take the blame for this.
Yeah.
But you're right. 3 weeks away. And the good thing is that if you try over and over again, you eventually, get to the point to where you can be short and sweet. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we are 3 weeks away. The first time in NBA draft history, at least I believe, or at least that I know of, that it's going to be two nights. First round Wednesday, January or June 26th, second round at 3 o'clock p.m. In the afternoon on a Thursday, second round. And Parker brought up a good point that I hadn't considered. Parker, I'll let you
Yeah,
tell.
you're gonna
Yeah,
like hijack my point, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So the drafts, doing it all in one night, gets really late.
Yeah.
And and Sean, we have covered the draft as media members in person. It's a long night.
It
I
absolutely.
can't imagine how long it is for people in the front office, the people in PR that are having to put out these press releases when these people are getting signed and stuff. But you have your first round, all the stuff that goes into the first round, and then you have the second round. That's really quick, but also too in the middle of the second round, you got to be getting your two-way contracts, your Exhibit 10 guys as well, and it's an all-nighter kind of thing. Um, Obviously they've done this for years. They're absolutely built for it, but also at the same time, this allows for everyone to kind of take a breather after the first round. And I want to say when I initially read the article when they announced this, they said that it should also allow for more trade negotiations within the second round as well. Sean, I know you love that. And I mean, they're going to grab people's attention for the second round. I mean, for one, Bronny James will be in the second round. So where's Bronny going to go? I'm sure we're destined to have one green room guy not get picked on the first round. And now it's like, oh, where are they going to go?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's one of those things where people are gonna watch it. I'm a sicko. I'll be there no matter what. But I'm excited for it for sure.
And the other thing about it is that since and again that's what I'm thinking. I think it makes sense for the NBA front offices who have to put a lot of effort into one of the biggest nights of the year when it comes to team building, not only for that season but for the future. But this could also increase potential activity in the first round. When we haven't had that much activity in recent years. As I'll let you allude to in just a moment. But Parker, we're 3 weeks away, and so on Tuesday. Now we're recording this on Wednesday, June 4th. On Tuesday, June 3rd, there were several mock drafts that were released. And with these mock drafts this time of year, you get intel. And you started to get some intel when it comes to the Grizzlies. And we're going to kind of unpack a few of those rumors and kind of read the tea leaves as to what it sets up the Grizzlies for when it comes to the 24 draft. And we'll start with this. Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, one of my favorite sources when it comes to mock drafts. I don't always agree with him, but great insight. There's a lot. I agree with him a lot more than I don't. The thing that I'll say though is that he gave some great insight though when it came to the Grizzlies, and the insight that he gave was that he hit on the fact that Memphis, according to league sources, had reached out to Houston about potentially, gouging what it would take to move up to the number 3 spot in this draft. Now, there could be several different reasons as to why Memphis could have that interest, and I'll discuss that in a moment, after Parker, discusses it. But Parker, we'll start with you. When you see Memphis having interest to move up at 3, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, it'll be really hard. I don't see it happening. So I'm doing an article later this month before the draft basically trying to figure out what the Grizzlies could be doing based off of rumors, but also historical context.
Wait,
So I've been looking at
where's that article going to be? Shift
on
that left shoulder.
Substack Elitis, my Substack.
Shift that
Sorry.
left shoulder. You got to shift that left shoulder.
Yeah,
There
Substack
you go.
Elitis. You see
Substack
that.
elite.
You see that awesome sign.
There we
But
go.
yeah, so when looking at the historical context, I go all the way back to 2013. So about the last 10 drafts. There have been 13 total trades. There have been 3 drafts where not a single top 10 pick was traded on draft night or before draft night. So 2015, 2020, 2022 were not traded. And obviously, too, I'm sure there was a lot of rumors that came out around that time about movement in the top 10. Never materialized. There has never been more than 2 trades within the top 10 in the past 10 years on draft night. Most typically top out at 2. And also within that, when you're looking at pick swaps within top 10 picks, no team has jumped higher than 4 spots. The New Orleans Pelicans, Atlanta Hawks, they swapped. They did a pick swap with the New Orleans giving Atlanta the 4th pick for 8th, 16th, but also too, Atlanta was willing to absorb the expiring contract of Solomon Hill, which they later used in a trade with the Grizzlies. And they traded Solomon Hill and Miles Plumlee for Chandler Parsons. So great little Grizzlies twist right there. But so it's a different situation. So yeah, while Atlanta jumped up 4 spots, for one, it's not 6. 2, they had another pick in the top 20. And 3, they had the cap space to absorb a bad contract to give New Orleans incentive to do a pick swap. So climbing up 6 spots would be hard. I appreciate the effort, and I saw a trade suggestion from the Athletics Kelly Iko. I don't know if you want me to talk about it now, or if you want to say anything else about what you think about the report. You want me to go ahead? All right, let's let it rip. All right. So Kelly Iko on his, I think it was on his podcast, the Iko's ecosystem on the Athletic, had made a fake trade and said, "What if the Grizzlies offered Luke Kennard, the 9th pick, in a lottery protected first for Jock Landale and his $8 million non-guaranteed deal, which the Grizzlies could just cut, clear the books, and open up the roughly $13 million non-taxpayer level mid-level exception. And then Jayshawn Tate and the 3rd pick. I am pro keep Luke Kennard. I want as many good players as possible. I want as many good shooters as possible. Luke Kennard has shown value to this team, plain and simple. But if that kind of opportunity presented itself, I kind of think about it a little bit, just because of the idea that not only can you position yourself to get your future starting center in Donovan Clingan, but you also have optionality across the board. If you'd rather go get a guard because you want to go get a veteran center, go get Reed Shepherd, Stephon Castle. If Washington does something surprising at 2 and Sar Share on the board, fantastic too. I like that optionality. But at the same time, I don't think it happens, in my opinion. And I know, Shawn, when we were talking earlier, you had a rationale on what this intel really means.
Yeah, to me, this intel is just simply a leverage play by Houston, and with how close to the best Memphis keeps things, I know that I know that there are a lot of things out there about Memphis this time of year, but if you track it back, very little of it seems to be actually from Memphis. It either comes from the player that they are potentially interested in, that player saying something, tea leaves being read, what have you. But I think, man, Parker, I think this is a point you made as well. I think this is a leverage play by Houston. We all know that Houston's ultimate play with this 3rd pick is because they want to use this as one of their best assets to go get a win now player. Because like Memphis, they're wanting to move up in that Western Conference race to be in the playoffs. They're ready to win now. And of course, the guy that they have on their radar is Mikal Bridges. They want to use this 3rd pick as a potential way to go get him. But they're wanting to kind of, play a cat and mouse game with Brooklyn and say, hey, we've got other teams that are interested. Well, Brooklyn's already come out and said in the 24 hours since this news broke that, hey, we're looking to keep Mikal Bridges. So I've always thought this was a bluff. Number one, because it's Houston who's using it as leverage play. Number 2, let's just be honest. What reason would Memphis want to have to throw another first round pick to Houston for them to have their arsenal to strengthen themselves as not only a division rival, but also a conference rival? And to me, also, there's just a general rule of I really don't want to trade an extra first round pick to move up to get a rookie in this draft because I think that there is sense for the Grizzlies to trade up for a Klingon or a Shepard or someone like that. And I don't think that they'll have to trade up to 3 to get that type of
Mhm.
player. So
Yeah.
basically, in my opinion, I think that the Grizzlies would just be kind of, bet or going against themselves or bidding against themselves. They would be overpaying for very little reason at all. And it would simply be just a dream scenario for Houston. And I just don't think that I think our front office is too smart to do that. But again, the big key overall, notice we haven't mentioned many names as to who the Grizzlies would trade up for, but you did mention a Klingon. Now, if Asar or Ricochet was there, okay, maybe, especially Sar, you may pique my interest a bit more. But say they're off the board. I don't think that 3 is the sweet spot to trade up. That's the main reason why I don't think it's worth the price to pay. But Parker, you have identified where that sweet spot is, and that's where it gets really, really awesome for a creative front office like the Grizzlies.
Yeah. So I think 6 is a sweet spot. And I still think that you can end up in a situation where you can get your guy on the board, and even if it's Donovan Clingan, because after 2, I think 3 with the Rockets, I don't think that makes. I see Clingan mocked there. It doesn't make sense. I know Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype, when he does aggregate mock, he had said that Şengün and Clingan share an agency, which I feel like that's more reason that they will not pick Donovan Clingan, because why why would an agent position his client in a spot where he's capped at being the backup 5? Because I don't think him and Şengün can share the floor together. They also have Steven Adams, who, Ime Udoka and Raphael Stone have both come out and said, we value Steven Adams. He will play for us. He's going to be a valuable part of this team next season. So where's that league Donovan Clingan? They might as well just go get Reed Shepard, Stephon Castle, maybe Rod Dillingham as well. And then San Antonio, they've been reaping these benefits of Victor Wembanyama at the 5. I don't see why they would draft Clingan at 4. Detroit at 5, they got Jalen Duren, but they've also been linked to Nick Claxton in free agency. I'm sure they have similar interest in Isaiah Hartenstein as well. So why are they going to go get Clingan? So that brings me to 6. So 6 with Charlotte. Reports have come out within the mock drafts that they really value Mark Williams as a guy, a part of who they want to build with, their starting center. And that's what I'm thinking that's the sweet spot, because, Charlotte, new front office, good chance to build rapport. And I don't think it would cost much to do so. So maybe they go 9-39. But then you tell Charlotte, do you want Santi Aldama or Zaire Williams? Because they have the cap space, but also, too, they're a young team. For them, it's an expiring contract. And if it works out, they're a restricted free agency. You have more of an ability to retain them if you see that if you see them as a fit next to LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. So, and I've talked with James Playwright of All Hornets Fan Nation. He does an awesome job covering the NBA from across the pond. And we agree that, yeah, some sort of framework like that would work. And that could help the Grizzlies trade up to go get Donovan Clingan. I think that's where we bring up the other team in the mix too, is the Portland Trailblazers, who, Zach Lowe on his podcast, he said he has heard that the absolute floor for Donovan Clingan is 7. I don't, and I know Javoni has reported that they're a team interested with interest to trade up. Sean Highkin, who has a Substack called the Rose Garden Report, I reposted this on X. His quote tweet about the aggregation of that. I don't. The paragraph above is fine, but what he said in parentheses is, personally, I'd be surprised if Portland trades up, because they got 7-14. That's 2 bites of the apple for a team that's in phase 1 of rebuilding. That's 2 bites of the apple that they get to bring in young talent, find gems next to Scoot Henderson and Shadon Sharp. So That's where I've identified as the sweet spot for Memphis to get their guy, perhaps Donovan Clingan, maybe if Shepard or Castle fall. Who knows? I don't. Yeah, I don't want to just throw all these names. I'm just saying those would be the three guys I would trade up for. I'm not saying that's who the Grizzlies are interested in. I'm saying if I'm the Memphis Grizzlies and I'm trying to trade up, I'm trying to get Donovan Clingan, Reed Shepard, or Stephon Castle.
But the point is that you can work with a deal there with Charlotte that makes sense for all three, right? So you trade 939 Santi and or Zaire to Charlotte for that sixth pick. You're in front of Portland. Take Donovan Clingan all day long makes perfect sense. We've kind of broken down. Getting him and what he can do at the center spot on that 4-year contract is extremely valuable. But
But
what if the Grizzlies, thank you for that extra but, what if the Grizzlies, in wanting to make the most value out of this trade, say they go, because Charlotte has mentioned that they would take bad contracts as well. Say they would go 939, either Zaire or Santi, and John Conchar. We get back six and Nick Richards. Now, Nick Richards is nowhere near the upside of a Donovan Clingan, but I definitely think that he's someone who could be a serviceable rotation big. What if we get Nick Richards and then we either pick Reed Shepard or Stephon Castle, to your point? Where's the ripple effect from that lead? Because if you get a Reed Shepard, you're getting shooting depth while you've also got your rotational center. But do you keep him with Luke Kennard? Or do you potentially trade Luke Kennard in another move, maybe for a big wing? That could be the option. If you go with the
yeah,
Stephon Castle, you go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah,
If you get a Stephon Castle in that deal where you also get Nick Richards, you potentially got your replacement for a Marcus Smart if you wanted to trade him this year or next year. I'm not saying that the Grizzlies should make their move or make their pick for a rookie simply based off it creating trade options for them. I think that's lower down on the priorities list of why you pick who you're going to pick. But the point that I'm getting at is that it's not just about one player in a Donovan Clingan. There's various different ways that they could go, and this could be a move where you're not having to give up that extra first. You're moving probably a player that doesn't, it's not in your future plans, like a Zaire or a Santi or a Conchar, and you're just using assets from this year to both get a player that you're looking to get out of this draft, so you're making the most of your draft pick, plus also maybe picking up an additional player who can fill a need as well. So the whole point is that they have options they can go with in that sweet spot at 6.
yeah. And then there another one that I will say agree to disagree on the Marcus Smart thing. I think if you're trying to win a championship next year, unless you're getting someone like Jared Allen, I think keep Marcus Smart. But
Agreed.
but I'm also thinking too, with Charlotte, they're looking at roster spots and stuff. What if you say though that framework that you said originally for Nick Richards, but what if you say, hey, we'll take back Bryce McGowan's and Seth Curry? So then they both have non-guaranteed deals for next season. That you waive them, that opens up your non-taxpayer mid-level exception before even accounting for Luke Kennard, who you can also just re-sign with bird rights. So if you opt out and renegotiate. So I think the trade up with 6 is the absolute sweet spot. But I also want to ask, can I flip this on you and ask you something too?
Sure.
All right. So in that report, in that podcast with Zach Lowe and Jonathan Givony, they mentioned, or Givony mentioned, that Memphis is one of the teams that likes this draft and talks about the idea of maybe trading down. But for one, can I ask you, can you see that? But also, can I also tell you why I don't see it? Yeah, there's only two teams with additional second round picks. So, with additional first round picks, excuse me. So, you have Utah, they could do 10 and 29. I think 9 for 10 and 29 is a little bit too rich for Utah to move up one spot. You have the New York Knicks who have the 24th and 25th picks. I don't think they want to trade up to 9. I don't think they're trying to use 24, 25 to move up to 9. And that's it. Those are the only teams that I see on Tankathon, unless my eyes are deceiving me. Those are the only two teams that have 2 first round picks after the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't know if I see it. Shawn, do you have an opinion on the trade down part?
Give your Utah idea. Give the
Oh,
Utah.
that I texted you earlier?
Well, we mentioned it on the podcast before.
Yeah, and I feel like I've written about it here and
Yes,
there. I've put it
yes.
out there in some Substack elitist posts, but what if you do like Santi or Zaire in 9 for Kessler in 10? And then with 10, you pick Devin Carter or someone like that.
Yeah, I'd even do I'd even do like 939 potentially in Santi or
Mhm.
Zaire for Kessler and 10 because I think Kessler has a bit more upside than a Richards. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
You're killing two birds with one stone, getting an established rotational big while also making your pick. But I think you bring up a good point in that I would listen if you're trading back if you're the Grizzlies. The reason that you're doing it is because you're wanting to find an established big, I think, which, puts on the radar, potentially, Kessler with Utah. You've got Wendell Carter Jr. with Orlando at 18. Of course, Jared Allen at 20, but it looks like that they probably, with Cleveland, they probably don't want to do it. I had mentioned in the past, could New Orleans want to trade up maybe to get their point guard with Herb Jones or Trey Murphy? They're not going to trade those guys. I'd love to talk 26 of Washington about Denny Advia. Probably not going to happen. So the point that we're getting at is that yeah, the idea of trading back is sensible for Memphis, but there's just a very narrow plane for them to land where a deal makes sense. And so
Hmm.
and so I think what is more likely, which is going to lead to the next question, going off that same scenario of the Grizzlies like this draft. Zach Lowe mentioned it too, Giovanni. Memphis could be a team where you could actually see them double dip in the first round. And that has been one of the hallmarks of Zach Kleiman on trade night. He did it in 2019, did it in 2021, and then came back and did it in 2022. Now, 21 and 22 haven't yielded a lot of results as of yet, which is fair to point out. But, Parker, I'll ask you this. I definitely don't think they're completely trading out. But I do feel that if the Grizzlies get aggressive, or excuse me, say they stay at 9 and they wind up picking the player that they want, I think it's more likely than not they don't go with 2 first-round picks in this draft. But you could see them potentially get creative for 39 if the right person were to fall. Because I do think, Parker, the three strengths of this draft are rotational bigs, shooting late, and defense. And those are either things the Grizzlies value or need. So your thoughts on,
Yeah.
how the Grizzlies could maneuver to get a pick in later in the first round.
Yeah. I mean, there's different avenues that I'm looking at with this. I mean, obviously, like you can stay at 9, you can even trade up. But what I'm also thinking too is like I'm looking at a team like Utah, who also they have 10, 29, 32. What if you negotiate? I don't know if they have room for 3 rookies on their roster, but what if you say, hey, we'll trade you 2 or 3 second round picks for the 29th pick, and you get a guy that's falling. Just looking at guys in that range, like Deron Holmes apparently has a first round promise. That would be awesome, in my opinion. Johnny Furphy, who I think he'd be more for your project, but I think he could be good. I think he has some stuff with his body that he has to work on. He's really skinny, not incredibly mobile laterally at the moment. What if I mean, you just don't know with this draft class. I mean, those are just 2 names of guys that I like, but I mean that also includes like a Jalen Tyson. I really like Jalen Tyson. Yeah, those are just some names, just like from skimming Tankathon at the moment. But that's I wouldn't be shocked. I want to be shocked if they trade if they trade back into the first round. Oh, another name too. Another name I'm a big fan of, Baylor Shireman. Baylor Shireman would be awesome. 6'8", can shoot off the dribble, can play make, rebound. He rebounds like a maniac. I think he averaged like 9 a game. But regardless, I think at the end of the day, what we're talking about here, Shawn, is all this stuff that's coming out, you can kind of take it for face value, but at the end of the day, there is optionality for how the Grizzlies can work the board. And that's something Zach Kleiman even alluded to in exit interviews is the idea of with 9, we're looking at everything. We're looking at trade up, trade down, picking at 9, or not trading, or not specifically with 9, but with the draft pick itself. The draft pick itself at exit interviews. They're exploring all options, including trade out, trade up, trade down, or staying there. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see all this unpack. I'm sure we'll come back here in a week or two, close to draft night, and we'll have a whole lot more new information that we'll be trying to digest. Stuff will start becoming more real or more hazy, but it's fun. It's a fun position to be in, I think.
You were kind of critical of Grizzlies general manager Zach Kleiman before it was cool. You know what I mean? So you said something back then that I was like, Peter, what are you talking about? Like, why would you say that? And I'm seeing it now. I think you were a little bit ahead of it then, but right now I think we're here. And something you said was that it's easier to take a team from being a horrible team to being a good team. At the time, it felt premature, but we're here now.
There's, thousands of really talented players, but there's only, a small percentage of them that make it to the NBA because it requires mental fortitude. It requires a certain amount of dedication. The Grizzlies were great at finding those guys. Somewhere along the way, they kind of stopped that, or they lost what was the identity of the team. And I think maybe that's changing. Maybe a G.G. Jackson kind of changes that. Maybe Vince Williams changes that a little bit. How do you turn a very good team into a great team? How do you make those moves that make that work?
Tune in to The Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
We're looking at making sure that the Grizzlies are top 5 in either offense or defense. So how do you get a team like that there? What are your must-haves to be a real title contender? So give me one.
Health.
Okay.
I think it's like it goes like a little bit sort of in the cliche obvious department. You got to be healthy, which we saw like the direct results of what happens when you're not this year, right? Like It was a mess in 100 different ways. So there you go. Number 1. I've got plenty more loaded for you.
All right. Mine is going to be good kitty. No, I'm kidding.
First off, pause. Pause.
Come hang out with Daniel Greer and Nathan Qualls on Grizz 901 Live. Every Tuesday night at 9:01 live on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
You've got 3 picks to work with on draft night. You got a creative front office. Zach Kleiman is going to do what makes the most sense. At the end of the day, we hear the Grizzlies like this draft, but you kind of get the sense that they may not necessarily have liked last year's draft because they traded their first round pick in it to go get Marcus Smart. So we're not saying that the Grizzlies just like everybody in this draft. At the end of the day, when we hear they like the draft, it could be the top part of it, and that's why they moved 39-9 to go get it done. But at the end of the day, what I do think, and Parker, this will kind of be my last, question to you. I, again, feel like that if the Grizzlies can add 2 reasonable rotation options to the current roster that they have, which to me would be a big wing in a big itself, but at the very least, someone that could be considered a 3, maybe a 4 with good shooting ability and a rotational big. If they can add those type things as a bare minimum, that's a good summer. That to me has helped fill needs. It's put depth where we need it to, further depth where we need it to be, and it gives you other options. But the big key for me is that if they want to do it with 2 rookies, okay, still don't think that's likely. But if they want to do it with a young NBA player who's already in a rotation plus a rookie, you get guys on these valuable contracts, and you're already dealing with the roster that's continuing to get expensive. But if you can add 2 of those type of players on those level of contracts with GG and with Vince, you've got a lot of versatility, you got a lot of optionality, and you've got a lot of contracts that are under control for multiple years that easily could become good value as these players mature. That's why I feel it's so important for the Grizzlies to really focus on getting value out of the pick that they make in the lottery, maybe even a second pick that they make. But it's just having the ability to get so much value out of those cost-controlled contracts for an expensive small market team. I think that's a very valuable way to go about doing business.
I mean, I can't disagree. I mean, I can't disagree with you at all. I cannot agree with you more. I almost mixed up my words there, but yeah, I mean, and the thing is, one thing you didn't mention too is just the upside in this. Like the fact of like, oh, you already won when you're looking at draft pick. I think we've gone out the window of using the 30th pick when it talks about Desmond Bain, but you altered your franchise by finding a franchise cornerstone at 30. You find complimentary guys at the 45th and 47th picks, and that's more often than not, like those are just shots in the dark, really. I know good scouting departments make the most of the second round. They make the most of all parts of the board, but at the end of the day, statistically speaking, you're not extracting that much value most of the time at those picks. So, like, let's say you use the 30th pick, you trade into the back end of the first round. Let's say by year 2, you find yourself a guy that can legitimately play in your rotation in the playoffs. Like, that's a steal. That is extracting value. And like you said, for a team that's getting expensive, they're in a small market. They're not going to attract many free agents like the Miamis or the LAs or the New Yorks or places like or the Texas teams. But you can, if you continue to find value around the margins, and it may not even be trading back into the first round. It could be your second round picks or your two-way contracts where you're converting them from their two-way contracts to these like hinky specials where they're on these like low risk, high reward type contracts, like your GG Jacksons, your Vince Williams, John Conchar, Xavier Tillman, guys like that. Like, that's incredibly valuable, man. And for, again, a small market team, you got to find value wherever you can. And for a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, it's very clear and evident that they are an organization that prioritizes the draft and extracting as much value in all avenues that they can.
Absolutely. And the thing that I'll end with is this, is that, I don't necessarily think that the existence of Vince and GG should have all that much impact on what the Grizzlies should do. At the end of the day, you need to use this pick that you have, the picks that the Grizzlies have, they need to be used in the way that's going to provide the most upside for this team long term. But I also do think that there's some sense in kind of diversifying what you have on those contracts. With GG, you have the ultimate upside lottery ticket. That's why they took him last year. With Vince, you kind of got that more win now guy, a bit of an older prospect, but one that can certainly is a great complement to your core. I think that since you've already got those two in place, again, I know that many people preach BPA, go upside. I'm not arguing against that logic at all. But for the Grizzlies in a position to where they're not the usual lottery team where they're ready to contend, this being a draft where you're probably going to find more value as if you're focused on role players instead of pure core upside all-star level players, and also the strengths of this draft, which again I mentioned, a big, shooting late, some defense. I feel that the Grizzlies have the ability, with the existence of Vince and GG and kind of with where they are on the competitive timeline, it makes sense for, again, them to focus on certainty of value and focus on what skill sets or roster needs that they have, which makes a big valuable. So again, I know that everybody may not agree with that, but I think that that's the reason why for this Grizzlies, basically what I'm getting at is that for this Grizzlies focus, especially with that lottery pick, if they can get as much certainty as possible that they will hit a double, maybe a triple with that, instead of trying to go ultimately for a home run, I think they have more reason to focus on that double or triple this year with where they are than a lot of other teams do. And that's why I'm okay with them potentially going to get like a Donovan Clingan, or potentially going with an older prospect like a Dalton Connect or what have you, and going with certainty of value and fit as much as they do upside.
Yeah. I mean, again, I cannot disagree with you there. I mean, at the end of the day, you're trying to contend for a championship, and you're trying to find the right pieces for sustainable success. And how are they best see fit? Again, I think we've made clear who we think best fits that. We'll see.
Absolutely. Well, cannot thank you enough, Parker. I know that we're going to be back, covering this as well. We're going to get into some prospects probably next time we talk. we're probably going to discuss, kind of pair up prospects. Talk about some prospects and maybe play similar position, maybe, offer similar skill sets, and why we would go with one but not the other. We'll look to do that on the next edition of GBB Live. But Parker, thanks so much. Obviously, folks can find your stuff at Substack Elitist, right?
Yeah, you find my stuff, Substack Elitist. I post everything on Twitter, X, however you want to call it, at Pac_Flocka. Shawn, I appreciate you having me on here. Y'all continue the great work over at Bluff City Media. And excited to keep chatting with you about the Memphis Grizzlies, their draft prospects, and how to build a championship contender this offseason.
Absolutely. And Parker, I'd be remiss if I did not ask your prediction. We are on the eve of the NBA draft.
Yes.
Parker
NBA
Fleming.
Finals, yeah.
Excuse me, NBA Finals. Parker Fleming. Who wins the NBA Finals? Who wins Finals MVP? And in how many games do they win it?
My heart is telling me Dallas in 6 with Luka Doncic winning Finals MVP, but my brain is telling me Boston in 7, Jaylen Brown at Finals MVP.
I agree on MVP. I think Jaylen Brown's going to have a big series. I want Boston to win over Dallas, just to be honest with you. I like Tatum. I love Jason Tatum. I'm especially when it's a superstar like Jason Tatum, who I think there's more positive than negative, though he gets scrutinized more than he should, in my opinion. I just want Boston to win one. With as close as they've been for a while, just win one. This is their best chance I think that they may have. So I'm going to go Boston 6, but I still will go with Jaylen Brown as the MVP, but hope Tatum gets his title. So
I get that. Shout out Memphis War Eagles. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, and if we could also
X would get a title.
X would get a title as well, and we would move past the narrative that Grant Williams couldn't make it with either of these two teams, but that is a story for another time. Until next time, Parker Fleming, you can find him at Paca_Flocka. All of his great work over at Substack Elitist. The best way I could phrase it, it is wonderful content for an even more wonderful cause by a wonderful person. So I'll leave it at that. Substack Elitist by Parker Fleming. You can find my stuff at BCM, or you can find the Grizzly Bear Blues live on Twitter, X, BCM Grizzlies, obviously, Grizzly Bear Blues, and of course, BluffCityMedia.co. My name is Shawn Coleman. You can find me at StatsSAC. For Parker Fleming, my name's Shawn, GBB Live. Go Grizz. We'll talk to you again soon here on GBB Live.